that were on maneuvers with us.
You say you had black units that were on maneuvers with you.
Yes,
All black units.
yeah. Troops of blacks. One was attached to us to protect our flanks.
And the idea at this point, you're still thinking you're going to be somewhere, probably in Europe, riding horses and fighting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And there was nobody above you who told you otherwise.
No, no. No, they were all cavalry. They were all horse cavalry.
Really.
I mean the old horse cavalry.
But and are you able to watch newsreels, of the fighting?
Oh yeah, but we'd go to the movies and watch them.
And there's no horses in those.
No,
But you're still thinking you're going to go over there and ride horses.
no. We had made up our minds that we were not going to fight a war on a horse.
Okay, so you're aware at this, even though you're training on horses, you're aware that this is just preliminary to the
Just
real thing.
basic training, yeah.
Okay, to the real thing. Okay.
Because we were going to go to OCS.
Okay. So take me through a day. Take me through a regular day of basic training of the horse cavalry at Fort Riley, Kansas.
Well, we were in barracks, of course, with bunk beds, one guy on top and one guy on bottom. And we'd get up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, get dressed, go to the mess hall and eat. And before we did that, though, we would be called out for roll call. And then after roll call, then we'd get dressed to go eat. We had our own mess hall. And all the guys would go down there and eat, and then afterwards we'd go back to the barracks and then form up and then march to the stables where the horses were. And we'd saddle up and mount and go out on maneuvers.
Now, how long would it take to get everybody saddled up?
It'd take about a half hour. Didn't take long, because we all had our own saddles and bridles, and we had to take care of them. And we couldn't walk back to the barracks until the sergeant said they're clean and you can go. It may take you a little midnight, not even get anything to eat. Be up at 4:30 the next morning.
Well, now, so you finish, you're saddled up, and you say you'd ride out to maneuvers. But tell me about the maneuvers. What would you do? How far away would you ride?
We'd about 5-6 miles out in Kansas, and we would be out there all day long.
And when you say, okay, so what would you be doing out there all day long?
We'd be practicing maneuvers, different ways of riding a horse, and draw saber charge. And
Draw saber charge. But when you say maneuvers, you're talking about, for example, you say you had 30 in a platoon, right? And then how many platoons in a?
There'd be 3.
3 in a what?
In a troop.
In a troop. Okay, and then troops are in what? Then how many troops in a what?
In a group.
In a group. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would basically have platoons like supporting each other, and you'd be having a simulated attack on a point.
Exactly.
Then you have this troop, this platoon's over there, this platoon's on my left flank, that's on my right flank, we're in the middle, we're drawing saber and charging.
Is that what you do?
Yeah. In fact, the mounted black troop were they were protecting our flanks, but there was also a black troop that was the foe, the enemy. And one time they charged, and we had a pommel roll and a cantle roll and a strap that tied them onto your saddle. And they'd take it very, very long. They'd take that and wrap the loose end around their fist and swing it with the buckle at the other end. And they came riding through and, of course, wrap it around your face and cut. Well, this troop did that to our black boys.
You mean the other black troop?
Yeah,
your black troop?
black troops, yeah. And so the razors came out. Straight razors these guys were carrying.
In the field?
In the field. And so that ended the the battle real quick. So we went that night. The captain called me and said he wanted me to go collect all the razors. So I went to the troop where the black guys were. And
this is your platoon?
no, not our platoon. It was they were a separate troop attached.
But these are the guys who were protecting your flank?
Yeah. So I went there, and they had a first lieutenant, white guy, who was in charge of them, and he had come from the South himself. So I told him why I was there, and he says, okay. He says, get one of those helmets and go around and collect them. And he told them to give up their razors. So I went around and collected all the razors and took them back to the captain. And he says, now he says, go back and tell the lieutenant that I'm having an officer's call in a half hour. So I said, okay, and I went back, and here they were stropping with their extra razors.
New razors.
They stropped them on their leather boots, of course, sharpened them.
And you hadn't been ordered to collect those.
No, and I didn't.
And you didn't.
I didn't. And the lieutenant didn't say anything either. He was from, I forget that famous school in the
Yeah.
South. No, it wasn't Virginia military, it was something else. But he was strictly Southern, a real Southern boy. And we sat and talked after that. And I asked him, I said, why is it you allow the blacks to cook for you and take care of the babies and even suckle them, but you won't sit down and eat with them? And he says, I'll tell you, he says, when they're doing that, they're your servants. When they sit down to eat with you, they're your equal. Mm-hmm. That's the first time I ever heard it explained. Mm-hmm. And he says, but I don't feel that way. Mm-hmm. He says, I never have. Mm-hmm. He said, some very good friends of mine are black. Mm-hmm. But it was a school like Virginia military, but it was something else.
Mm-hmm. So that was the day. You basically outmaneuvers all day.
Yeah, we do that almost every day.
And then you'd come back, and then basically the officers would have plans for you each day.
Yeah, well, it was all scheduled. It was all part of the training schedule, and one day we would go out and fire the 50 millimeter or 80 millimeter mortar. Mm-hmm. And another day we'd go out and fire the 50 caliber machine guns. Mm-hmm. And did these different things that were required for basic training that you would do. And then we would practice crossing a river.
Oh, on newly trained horses.
Yeah, we'd take the saddle off and put on the shelter half, and then put our machine guns in that and float it across the river like a boat. Uh-huh. And we'd take our canteens and empty them and tie to a pommel roll strap so that if it sunk by it would float and we'd know where it was. Uh-huh.
And how are the horses taking this notion of crossing a river?
Oh, they'd be all right because we would either get on them bareback or we would grab their tail and still having the reins on our hands and go across the river.
But they all went across willingly?
Oh yeah,
Really?
Yeah. The horses were great swimmers.
Oh, okay. Because some of the horses I've been on haven't liked water too much.
Yeah.
That's good. Now tell me about some of the old salts, the guys who've been in the horse cavalry all their lives, who were involved in your training and.
Well, we had a first soldier who was.
First sergeant.
Yeah, and he was just finishing up his 30 years, and was going to retire on January 1st, and of course December was Pearl Harbor, so he stayed in. But he was a real old salt. In fact, I got KP, and the lieutenant came. His name was Garish, Lieutenant Garish. Came and wanted to know where I was when one of the corporals took the report. They said, well, he's on KP. So he came busting in the kitchen and grabbed me and took me over to the first sergeant. He said, I thought I told you that I didn't want my non-com on KP. And the first sergeant said, he's not a non-com, he's a buck private. He said, this is my troop, and he says, I'll run it the way I want. He says, Hawke, you get back to the KP. So I did. I heard him say to the lieutenant, he says, and remember this, Lieutenant, I changed your diapers for you when you were a kid for your old man. Lieutenant Garish, he was a character.
This was Sergeant Garish.
No, Lieutenant Garish, but he had gotten up to be a buck sergeant in the cavalry, horseshoer, and had gone through OCS. That's how bad they needed.
Officer. Well, was he the one who hit the horse?
Hit the horse? Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, this one kid couldn't get the bit in the horse's mouth because the horse kept throwing its head because he knew the kid was scared of him. So the lieutenant came over and said, I'll show you. And he grabbed the bit and grabbed the horse by the ear and pulled the horse's head down to put the bit in. And of course, by this time, the horse was very brave. And he threw the horse and it picked the lieutenant up of course, he let go. Came down and kind of turned, and the horse bit him on the shoulder.
Oh.
So he turned around, and he's a short guy. He was about 5'7", weighed about 200 pounds, one of the most powerful men I've ever met. And he leaped up and grabbed the horse by both ears and bit the horse on the nose. And then he said, "Now watch this." So he got back just as far as he could while still having the reins, and he came and got underneath the horse and lifted the horse up on its side, tied the horse's head to its rear legs, and left it there all day while we went out on maneuvers.
Wow.
When we came back, he undid the horse and told the kid, "Now put the bit in the horse's mouth." So the kid did, and he says, "There's how you do it." He says, "Use guys."
Use guys?
Use guys, yeah, he was from New York. Use guys.
Now, did he end up going to war, do you know?
I don't know whether he did or not. We had another lieutenant that was in Europe with Tom, Brother Tom.
Mm-hmm.
He had been at Fort Riley. Guys hated his guts. Yeah.
And how was the food?
Horrible. We didn't get much to eat. I was 155 pounds when I went in. Perfect shape because I just boxed at 155. And 3 months later, I was 125.
Really?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times you didn't make it to the mess hall at times. Because you had to take care of the horse.
And there were 100,000 guys going through this.
Well, no, there was a 10th Mountain outfit that was actually, it was a mechanized outfit that was all trained that was there. Of course, they had about 15,000 themselves. Then they had the hospital, and then they had this show outfit that would show you how to come up the river, take everything off, and they did this all just perfect. Take the saddles off and put them on the shoulder halves, float everything off, go across, and then take off.
Yeah.
Just a beautiful outfit. I think it was called the 28th. Yeah.
So all this time, though, you're realizing that, you know, you're not going to go to war on a horse.
Right.
And at some point, you're going to have to choose. Now, at this point, did you know that you were going to choose amongst you had different options?
Yeah, well, they came up with the option that if you had signed a contract, like for senior RTC, you could go to the Air Corps, and the ground forces couldn't keep you. So those of us that wanted to go fly, well, we applied and got accepted, and they made us cadre at that time, and then put us in tanks.
Which in tanks?
Yeah, to go through tanks for basic. The reason they did that so that we could go through tank OCS if we didn't go to the Air Corps.
Oh.
So we left there and went to the Air Corps.
You told your dad you had a choice. What was his response?
Well, either go to infantry OCS or go to the Air Corps. And he says, "Do anything but don't go in the infantry."
Because he had been infantry, right?
He had been infantry all his
He'd
life.
gone through all of that.
Yeah.
Now, but your brother went into armor, George.
Well, Tom actually graduated from OCS because he went right in after. We actually went in a week before the seniors did, but we all ended back at Fort Riley at the same time. But they almost immediately went into OCS.
Okay.
And I would visit him there on weekends, and the whole time I would visit with him, I'd be polishing his rifle or his boots while he was studying for for some courses. But he graduated and got his commission.
Oh, okay.
He went overseas almost immediately.
But he was in tanks, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, he went to tanks, yeah.
Yeah.
So at Fort Riley, you went into tanks while at Fort Riley.
And we started through basic, yeah, and then, but by the time we got through about 2 weeks, we got called to the Air Corps.
Okay, and at that point, you went in as a navigator as opposed to a pilot. Why was that?
Well, you went through a classification. This was out at Santa Ana, California. I went through classification, went through all these tests, and they had what they called stay nines. Are you familiar with stay nines? And so you had to pass a stay nine to go to a particular school. Well, my stay nines were all nines for pilot, for navigator, for bombardier, for flight engineer, and so forth. So it depended upon what they needed at that time is if you had a high enough score while you went there.
Mhm.
So most of us being college kids, but we scored quite high in navigation, and we all went to, all those that went from Fort Riley to Santa Ana, California, went to navigation school except for those who didn't get nines in navigation, and they went to pilot school.
Went to pilot school? They needed smarter people to be navigators and
Yeah,
pilots.
exactly
Well, that
right.
makes sense at a certain level.
We kept telling them that.
Okay, well, let's end the Fort Riley period here.
Okay.